Hello. Welcome to the podcast. This is episode 111. You can find us everywhere. I'm just going to say that from now on. Tonight, so I know I said I'm sorry. Last week, we did an episode on fentanyl, which was brought to us by Desiree. Those of you who are listening know her. Tonight, so I'll give you a little story. So I went on Facebook and I sent it out. Sometimes we'll do that when we have a really good show. And this lovely lady, Sheila, reacted, sent me a message. She's like, "I'd love to be on the show," and that's it. Sheila. I guess I guess this episode is going to be kind of about addiction, where we can talk about fentanyl and carry it over from the last episode. That's fine, but it's more about the disease that is addiction. And Sheila has a wealth of experience with it. And so Sheila, can you give us like your resume?
Like literally?
Well, not literally. Like you told me about your quora and that you're a nurse and all those things. If you could kind of go over that, that'd be great.
I was an LP in 1978. I went on and got my RN in 1984. Then I went on recently and trained as a counselor, which we call ourselves recovery coaches, to help with families and people in active addiction, people trying to get clean, and worked in, some grant programs. I've done a lot of speaking. I've done a lot of writing. I speak at the rehabs, inpatient, outpatients, detox units, churches, wherever they invite me. I usually go and speak on addiction and just share my story of hope, because there is hope in recovery. We do recover.
So can you explain why you are the resident expert on this?
I was in my addiction for 43 years. I was an alcoholic at age 15. My father was an alcoholic. There's many drug addicts in my family. We have drug babies in my family that were born addicted to drugs. My nephew just got out of prison he went to prison. I got clean. He did 5 years prison. I did 5 years on the outside. I should have gone with him. I just didn't get caught, was the only difference. So I've lived it. I got clean in a very broken system. If I had have trusted the system, and this is probably the most powerful thing I will say the whole night, if I had have trusted this system to get clean, I would be sitting in a mental institution for the rest of my life. And the only reason I'm not is because I had a sister that would not give up on me. The system is broken.
I tend to
made me an expert. I lived it. I had 5 inpatient stays for misdiagnosis, a simple misdiagnosis.
Well, I mean, being sorry, Jack, being a psych nurse, I see a lot of patients that come in and they are just damaged. We get a lot, and once you've been doing this for a while, I can tell who is the drug-related psychosis versus schizophrenic psychosis or manic psychosis. And the drug psychosis is there's a clear dividing line between what is drug-related versus what is a more organic vibe, like just schizophrenia or manic behavior. The drug psychosis, for me, it seems that they have their wits about them to a certain degree, that the voices, they're just a little differently aware of their voices, and they tend to accept those voices more easily. There is that manipulative quality to the drug-related psychosis, which I find interesting because it shows an odd level of sanity to their psychosis that you don't see with the others. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm. Very well said.
So yeah, so I guess why don't you give us a little bit of your story, how you started out and how we got to where we are now. That's a pretty long story, but you know, we'll butt in where necessary.
I'll just do a real quick version. I started drinking at the age of 15. When I was 18 and working in an outpatient clinic, drugs were so readily available then. The doctors wrote scripts all the time. My drug dealers were all doctors.
What year was this, would you say?
That was 1980.
Okay.
And that's where I started smoking weed then. And then I got disabled with arthritis in my early 30s. And I was put on methotrexate and high doses of steroids, nothing controlled my pain. They gave me Darvocet N100s with refills, which actually has methadone in it. My dad was addicted to it. I was addicted to it. Then I had 13 deaths in my family later on in life. And I was put on Xanax early with my opiates. I added Xanax, which is what drug addicts do. I'd have periods of getting clean, but I'd get clean, I'd go back, I'd do more. Every time you go back harder, you go back more. And that's what I did, to the point that at the time that I got clean, I didn't get clean by choice. I did not ever plan on getting clean. I planned on dying in my addiction. Wow. But that's not the way it played out. And I went to rehab for my family. But after I started feeling better, then I started wanting it for myself. But it's the most painful, loneliest, misunderstood, empty, dark place you'll ever be in your life. I lost my memory. I was committed to a mental institution against my will. Getting my memory back was horrible. I cold turkeyed methadone is what happened. I didn't detox the way you should have detoxed, because it took me 7 months to detox a 14-year methadone habit, and it was all against medical advice. And I was a rambling idiot. I mean, I couldn't stop talking, hadn't felt emotion in 14 years from the methadone alone, which methadone is like walking. When you get on methadone, which is synthetic heroin, it was invented for Hitler by the Germans. It's like walking into a prison and the door's open, but you can't get enough clarity to get out. You're in the prison, there's the door, it's open, but you can't figure out how to get out of it. And I came to South Carolina from Virginia because my sister owned a second home here, and I had to get away from what had broke me. And I had to go back to the methadone clinic because it had such, cold turkey methadone. It has a very long half-life. If I take 100 milligrams of methadone today, tomorrow 50% of that's going to be in my body. The next day I'm still going to have 25, and that is the half-life of it. And then each day you're putting more, so you just build and build and build. And methadone is stored in your fat cells. Well, I lost 80 pounds in my detox. Wow. From methadone burning the fat, my body burning the fat to get the methadone. Jeez. And I have never been so sick in all my life. For 7 months, I would sit in this house alone in total darkness with an iPad and listen to music and pray. And that's what sustained me. I had a cab that picked me up. I couldn't even drive. I had a cab that picked me up every morning, took me to the methadone clinic, brought me back at dark. I'd leave here at 5:30. I did not want to see daylight. I didn't want to deal with the world. I didn't know how. Hadn't felt emotion in at least 14 years. And then all of a sudden I'm feeling all this emotion. And I was where I couldn't really get to drugs, which was a good thing because I would have gone back. A lot of times I would have gone back. But one thing that definitely would have sent me back would have been the cravings. I craved so bad, you can't even imagine. I just sit and cry and say, somebody please take me to water. The system needs to make detox and rehab easier. There was no reason for me to have gone through a lot of the stuff that I went through. And I was disabled, and I should have had an advocate. I asked for him, I didn't get it. I was just violated. and you have to pick your battles. You know, you can't fight them all. You just got to pick your battles, and that's what I kind of tried to do. And it all happened for a reason. You know, I'm here tonight for a reason. I just truly believe that everything happens for a reason. It all just had to happen like it did for me to get clean, for me to touch lives. And we're talking about my autobiography. I'm not sure how I ended up on Quora, but it's the 13th most viewed website in the world. And I started writing about my pain and my trauma. And in my writing, my pain actually went back to the 5-year-old inner child. And when I found her, and I'm like, I did this praying and writing, I could see her just like she's standing in the room with me. And I said, baby, you have been hurting for so long. I said, I come to set you free. I said, you don't have to stand there and hurt no more. You're not abandoned anymore. Mm. I couldn't sleep for weeks, had horrible nightmares. I had night terrors. And our disease talks to us. Every day our disease tells us we're useless, we're no good, we'll never make it. You know, the whole world hates us, that we're nothing. And then the stigma of it all, that just adds to it in the way we're treated. We were treated as if we are nothing. I was abused so many times during my addiction. And that's the reason now that I risk a lot telling my story. I mean, I go through a lot to tell my story. I have people trying to sell me drugs on Facebook.
Oh,
but I'm stronger than they are. They don't know who they're dealing with now. I'm not going back there. I'm not going back
Good
there.
for you.
I'll be locked back up, be locked somewhere, than to go back to drugs. That's not an option for me
Good
anymore.
for you.
Good for you.
Quick, I just had a question. When you were saying with your sister helping on, the house that you were detoxing in, was she living with you, or were you by yourself at that time?
I was alone. They didn't realize how sick I was because my family had never been through anything like this. And I hid my addiction and how deep I was into addiction, as deep as I could go. Like there's a spectrum of addiction. And I was like on the end of the spectrum where I was in total isolation. I never left my house. I hadn't been to the grocery store in 14 years. I had a housekeeper. I had a truck coming by bringing food. The Swan truck came to my house because I was in a rural area. And my housekeeper would go grocery shopping for me. I had a friend that lived with me. He's a drug addict too. And he would drive me to my methadone clinic and back. And I had the people in the methadone clinic so snowed, my counselor actually helped, covered for me so many times when I got caught selling drugs and people report me and stuff like that going on. And kind of what set all of my detox into motion was they fired her. And my whole system in the clinic was gone. There wasn't nobody cover for me no more. There wasn't nobody going to, help me get my dirty urines changed around. But I could convince them of anything. We're master manipulators. And even when you get clean, you have to be really careful about manipulating people because we're the best. Because it's what we do.
It's how you survive. I mean,
we're very sick people. We're very sick people. And if people would realize that, like I say, if the disease doesn't kill you, the lifestyle will. It's true.
So I was talking to you earlier, and I'll just bring it up now, that my feeling is, like I said, I work on an addiction unit on occasion, and it's one of the harder ones that I work for because I'm smart. And I get the manipulation part. It's so huge. It's a massive part of this. Addicted people are master manipulators. They can find a way to put it on you. They can blame it on other things. And it's not that those things aren't valid, but at the time of the manipulation, it's all about getting your next hit, getting the phenobarbital or the what is it called? Subutex or Suboxone. Yeah. It's about getting the medications to just get you through. Often it's about having a 3 hots and a cot. I can't tell you how many patients I've had that I know they're there because they got a roof over their head. They can get the drugs that will get them through it. And let me just clarify, I'm not diminishing their problem, but what I am saying is that the manipulation, when you allow it, you're kind of enabling. Like when you give the alcoholic the benzodiazepines, you're just promoting that, okay, well, we'll give you this so that we can collect the insurance money and blah blah blah. So for me, I feel like you have to have a coexistence of behavioral therapy, CBT, DBT, you name it, whatever it is. But you need to have that with the addiction treatment, because if you don't, they're going to go back to mommy didn't love me, I was abused, all the things. And again, I'm not diminishing those things. I'm saying that those are as important as the actual physical addiction. I mean, I don't know. How do you feel about that?
That's exactly right. The drugs are not the problem. Why we use the drugs is the problem. I used because I was abandoned 5-year-old that was sexually molested. I lived my whole life thinking, you know, that there was something wrong with me, and I never dreamed that was the source of why I used. I knew I had issues, and the biggest issue was that I was forming relationships, and I learned. I have a book coming out. My next book is Rebirth of a Dead Soul, and I go through growth and development. And when I was abandoned was when trust versus mistrust. So I learned mistrust.
That's what, Piaget? It's a psychological that it's either Piaget or I can't remember the other guy's name. Anyway, never mind. Go ahead.
And then abandonment is the single worst emotion that a child can feel, to be abandoned. And I was abandoned by both parents. Then I was separated from all my siblings. And it took me a long time, a lot of hard work, a lot of writing, a lot of quiet time alone. And like I can just literally feel the parts of my brain open back up. Like the sex abuse didn't even open up until last year. I remembered little bits, but I didn't remember a lot, and I don't want to remember a lot. So I'm going to try to do the magnetic therapy with your eyes, EDT or whatever it's called. That when I think back, I have no happy childhood memories, none. So but they'll do that. When I think back, I will think back to a happy memory. Like I have a friend that did it that was raped. She don't think back to the rape now. She thinks back to something happy, and that magnetic therapy worked wonders. It's just hard to find therapy. It's hard to afford it. And that's why I said I wish I had my methadone detox on video. And from here on out, I will be videoing, and I will be sharing the rest of my recovery, because I'm just, and like what I find too with my writing, every time I peel back another layer of the pain and things are getting good, and then you realize there's still another layer. It's just like I keep peeling layers, and I think that's why recovery only ends with life. But I know how to deal with those emotions now. I was a survivor. I was never taught life skills, coping skills. I survived. I fought my way through life because that's all I knew.
So you had again, we were talking earlier, you had given me, I don't know if it was statistic is the right word, but your recovery is kind of anomalous in recovery. Is that not correct?
Yes, sir.
Like most people do not reach the level of recovery that you have based on your history.
Yes, very much. Like you spoke on this earlier when you were talking about how many people manipulate. They're there for the bad. Yeah, 10 to 12% of people in addiction are being successfully rehabilitated.
Wow, that's not a lot.
20 in my class, and I'd look around and say, "Man, I won't be one of the two to make it out of there. I won't be. That's so and so make it, but I'm never going to do this." But yeah, I mean, and it's so frustrating. That's why I don't volunteer as a recovery coach every day, because I've seen too many people die and they keep saying you got to get a thick skin, but that's not who I am.
Yeah.
I'm an empath and I care deeply. And I also have ESP. I was tested at Duke University for that. And I developed, we all have it. Mine's just very developed. And so is my sister's, because my father was an alcoholic when I was reunited with my parents. And it was a survival technique. It's like you live in a war zone. As my whole life, my senses were as if I was living in a war zone. I always had to know what was going on, who was drunk, who was going to try to kiss me, who was going to try to get in my bedroom and lock the door and hide in the closet. So, and then I'd have to go to school the next day, and then the teachers would be the same way as what I've been through at home. I couldn't learn. I thought I was the dumbest kid in school. And you know, and I'm not the sharpest one, but I definitely wasn't the dumbest one. But I couldn't see it because, you know, all the red flags were there that I would be a drug addict, and the only reason, or go to prison. And the only reason I didn't, because I come, this is probably the hardest part of my story. I come from a family that was involved in a small town with a lot of organized crime. I was 15 years old flying with my boyfriend on his airplane, and he was buying stolen equipment. His dad was the sheriff. My aunt was actually involved with him. She killed a man. It's a long story, but I grew up in that kind of environment, and I was always taught I was above the law because everything went away. Everything went away for me, or I would have been charged multiple times, not with just selling drugs, but with assault and battery, and just out into stuff I shouldn't have been into. And when I was on Xanax, I went in Walmart and stole 5 TVs and ran them through the register with my friend that was a drug addict was there. Then I got in the parking lot. I didn't know what I was going to do with 5 TVs. I didn't need 5 TVs. It was the dopamine fix of stealing that stuff out of that store. And, you know, with the drugs, it's the chase. The chase in that pill is a fix, just like putting it in your mouth and using it, or putting the needle in your arm. And then all of that combined is actually the hug that we needed from our parents and the love that we never got. That's what we feel. We feel loved. We feel warm. We feel like somebody. We're somebody when we're on drugs, because we're not feeling the pain's not overriding all of that. So, you know,
because you're getting that dopamine kick. And
absolutely.
For those in the audience, I think we've talked enough dopamine with you guys, but so like dopamine is your reward center. So you have a chocolate donut, you get a dopamine high. You do something successful at your job, you get that dopamine kick. But now I don't want to use the term weaponizing it, but it's been explored that when you get that little red dot on your Facebook, that you get a dopamine hit. You're like, I gotta check that out, even though it's just a meme about a cat hanging or whatever. So yeah, that's huge. I'm glad you brought that up.
And my dopamine fix now is music. I can get as high on music as I've been on drugs. I like writing. Has been it's been very rewarding to me, because I've seen it touch so many lives. On Quora, I just had a story hit 1 million views.
Wow.
I had 2 stories in World News, and I have over 8 million views on Quora in less than 2 years. And I don't.
What is the question that you're answering that's gotten so many responses?
The $1 million one was the birth of my son.
Okay.
I actually died twice giving birth to him. I coded twice. And my husband had to decide which one of us lived. And that was the question. What do the doctors mean when they ask you which one do you want them to save? And I wrote that story, and it hit 1 million views.
Wow, that's great.
Pretty damn good story, though.
It's really interesting, because I don't feel connected to my writing. I feel like that feels like somebody else's life. I have a total disconnect to my writing. That's like that belongs to somebody else. That's not my life. I can't wrap my head around 8 million people. And and I just can't absorb it. I can't comprehend it. It's just too much. It overwhelms me. And that's one reason I quit doing public speaking, because people would just bombard me because they see it in me. They know I love them. They know I care about them. They know I want to see them have a better life, and that I understand. And I want my legacy to be that I cared about people. To say, I want people to say, yeah, Sheila really cared about those drug addicts. She'd go be on down on the railroad tracks, and she'd be wherever she had to go to help them, encourage them, and be there for them.
That's
But
what's important in life, right? I mean, it's taking care of each other. One question, just you were talking earlier, and it just got me thinking, and I'd love your perspective. So many people that have addiction issues and prolonged, have stories from had problems as children, either with like missing parents or abuse and things along those lines. I mean, when you talk about like the system being broken, it seems to me, just rhetorically, like, wouldn't it be a good idea to identify these children early and have a way of interceding so that they don't take that path, in the first place? Because I think it's always hard to stop, but it's got to be easier to help a 13-year-old than a 50-year-old.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, in your
great.
experience, have you seen, I mean, is that a thing? Like, are there, and I don't know. I mean,
And see, that's why I've done the amount of research and keep prolonging the publication of my book, is because it's a teaching book for parents. All the red flags were there. Nobody cared. Nobody cared about me. My mother never hugged me. My mother never told me that she loved me. And I asked her when I was in the
right now. I said, for the record, I want to give you a big fat hug.
You know what? I love myself now, and God loves me more, and that's enough to sustain me for the rest of my life. I don't need their love now. I'm ultra independent, and that's a trauma response. And that is like my book. It's a teaching book for parents. Hey, if your child's showing up at school and she's having problems, she needs help. There's your red flag. She could be a drug addict. I was the third child born. Third child's the most likely to be a drug addict. Third child's the most likely child to go to prison. But my parents had an 8th and 9th grade education. I was born into poverty, and all the odds were against me. All the odds.
Sounds like.
Look at you
It's
now.
a God thing. It's a God thing. I didn't, trauma didn't do anything for me. Trauma did nothing but destroy my life. Love is what healed my life. Love healed me.
How do you deal
with? We can't do that for each other, and we can't be good to each other, then this will never turn around. We'll never see any difference.
Yeah, I mean, compassion.
Parents, they don't get it. The parents don't get it. There's no books out there on it, because even doing my research, I had a hard time finding resources. I'm just real blessed that my son is a pharmacist, and he works at a trauma center, and he's got a really high IQ. So he is a great resource person for me. And he stood by me all through my addiction. But it took me 5 years to get that relationship back. And I hurt every day. I hurt. I lost custody of him when he was 13 years old. And to this day, I have never forgiven myself. He forgives me, God forgives me, and there's days that I make it right, but I'm just not there yet. But I'll get there, because I'm not giving up. It's not an option. I am not going to let addiction beat me. I'm not going out like that.
And that's the thing.
There's a big fuck that too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry for all the emotions.
No, you said something earlier about not. You dislike, or you can't really do that many like public appearances, or you've grown to not like them. And it seems like a big challenge is, as it being in recovery or recovered. I don't know if anyone ever really recovers, past tense, but being in recovery and wanting to help other people, you're sort of staying in that world, right? I mean, you're still talking to people that are going through this, would it be easier for you personally to like not do that, to just go off and never even think about it again? I mean, I
Yeah,
don't know.
and I agree. And you are the first person I've ever heard to bring that out, ever. First time I've ever heard that discussed. Absolutely, because I don't like people counting their days. This year, I didn't even celebrate 5 years. I didn't even think, dang, I've been clean 5 years.
Hmm.
I, I was in recovery because my life was going on. People get clean and they stay working in recovery the rest of their life, and I thought that's what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
I get tired sometimes of sharing my story, but it's really wild the times I do show up. I think I see a life I've touched. Like I was out riding on a Harley one night and I said, I really don't want to go speak tonight, but I've told them I'd show up and I did.
Hmm.
And I immediately connected with the girl trying to detox methadone. And we, as a volunteer, I stayed with that girl till she got clean. You think, well, I don't, people's tired of hearing my story, but when you come out of the fire, the first thing you want to do is go back and pull somebody else out. And in recovery, we have this thing that you pay it forward. We keep paying it forward. What people came and gave so freely to me, because it was the people in recovery that I listened to, the ones that made it, not the counselors that had the degrees and they knew all the book stuff. It was the ones that came back and said, hey, it was hell hardest thing I've ever done, but I did it. And they're
Hmm.
all tan and they got a good life. They got nice cars sitting in the parking
Right.
lot. And you're like, dang, I used to be like that. I'll never make it back. I'll never make it back. I'll never have another tan. I'll never fly on another airplane. I just really felt like my life was over, that I would never have my life back. But in recovery, though, that's a good thing. If you don't get confident, and then you get bored. I grew up in a home of drama. I dreaded Christmas because my dad was going to be drunk and my mom was going to be bitching at him. They was going to be fighting. So
Hmm.
I ran on all that adrenaline. I ran on all of that drama. And if the drama wasn't there, I created it.
You
So
created it,
when the
yeah.
drama goes away and the adrenaline fix is going away and the dopamine's going away, you go in a hole. And then where I was on Xanax, I wasn't medically taken off of Xanax. I took myself off. I was on those for over 40 years. Xanax, between 35 and 40 years at least. And I mean, I
Wow.
abused them. I double script Xanax. Opiates were my best friend, but Xanax was the love of my life. It took all my pain away. It took all my inhibitions away. I could go in a party. I didn't feel like everybody's looking at me. I didn't feel alone. It didn't really matter. I didn't feel
And that was the point.
the whole
I'm
thing. I don't
just
want to. I don't want to be me. I don't want to be that person. I want to be somebody else.
I'm just wondering if and I think it's a very human reaction, like no matter, everyone has challenges in life, some much more serious challenges than others, but like what you're saying, like the first thing you want to do is pull someone else out of the fire once you escape the fire. I think whatever someone's situation is, I mean, if you're like, oh, my car broke down, I went to this mechanic and they screwed me over, and then like someone else in your neighborhood's like, oh, my car broke down, you're like, don't go to that guy, he's gonna screw, everyone tries to help everyone else. But there is also this balancing act that, if from what I'm picking up from what you're saying, where you also have to protect yourself a little bit. You have to be measured with, you can't just, hi, I'm Sheila, I'm getting in a bus, I'm going on tour around the country speaking every night. It would be, you'd run yourself, through the wood chipper doing that. So it's got to be a balance, I would imagine, to take care. You still have to take care of yourself. And you can't burn the candle at two ends. You just
So
can't.
if I may
Yeah,
interject,
I have to
um,
decompress. Like if I go out and I've been bombarded with all these people because I feel all of their emotion, and I have to have days just to sit and decompress from that. I know that. And that's why I keep like getting farther and farther away from the speaking and telling our story. I always say God uses the broken to help the broken, but sharing our story is so healing for us.
Mhm.
And I have that healing. They say in recovery, we tell them talk about it till it's not important anymore. you know, it's not important to me
That
to
annoys
tell
you.
it, but it's important for me to help people. That's my part in it, is I want to help other people get better. I want to be the face of hope. I want to be the message and the voice of hope that it can be done. And if I can do it from the extreme that I was, anybody can do it.
And I think that's what people need to hear who are dealing with that. I mean, for myself included in the past, when I was less mature, it's like, oh well,
Last
you
week.
know, yeah, last week, well, if you have some problem, we'll just stop doing it. You know what I mean? Like it's so it's so ridiculous. But our society is sort of like, oh, you have just stop taking the drugs then. And it's like, well, it's a little more complicated than that. So I think if you're dealing with someone that's dealing with what you went through and they talk to you, they probably pick up pretty quick that you're the real deal. Like you're not talking down to them. You're not, you've been in their shoes
You're,
before.
you're not above them, you're beside them.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
we
But
have
I think,
like minds. We have like minds. That's why drug addicts help drug addicts so much. We have black minds. They already understand half my story. I don't have to tell them what it's like to crave. I don't have to tell them what it's like to chase a pill, not sleep, and have restless leg, and go through withdrawal and take drugs to get up and feel the same day every day. The high is short lived. You're just taking drugs to feel the same every day. There wasn't no highs left for me. Took drugs every day to feel the same because I did not want to go through withdrawal.
Just to
No
feel
high.
normal, just to feel
Yeah.
like you can get through the day. So, Sheila, I have a memory that goes back pretty deep. Mid 90s, I met this guy. I was working in Hagerstown. Jack, you probably remember when I was doing that.
Mhm.
But I met this guy, and he was a heroin addict, and he explained it to me so eloquently. And that is the thing that I found with an addict that is really recovered or recovering. They're very eloquent. Like it's probably part of the master manipulation thing, but they're masters of their words. And he explained his heroin addiction as though heroin was a living entity, as though it was a person in the room. He didn't refer to as her or him, but how he explained it made me feel like the addiction was something visceral, something you could almost reach out and touch. And I was just wondering if you shared that feeling in your addiction.
Yeah, most definitely. My opiates were my best friend. They were always there for me. When you asked me to get clean, you asked me to give up my best friend, and you asked me to give up the love of my life, because Xanax was the love of my life. It was as if it's an entity. But I believe that addiction is a multitude of demons. I truly believe that. Can I prove it? No. But do I believe it? Yes.
Yeah, maybe
It's an entity.
when
It's
we're
a
talking angels and
it
demons.
curves.
I'm sorry. Maybe when we're talking about addiction, we should be looking at it more as though it's something more visceral than we do now. Because quite frankly, my experience with treatment of addiction is often just another addiction. And if I may parlay off of that, my mom taught me that the best treatment for an addiction is a good addiction. Working out, writing, in your case, writing. It's where you can get those endorphins, because that's really, if we want to get into the neuroscience of it, the endorphins are what really drives this. And so you work out, or you write, or you paint, or you
Do a podcast.
do a podcast. Oh man, I can't even tell you how cathartic this show is for me. If we never have more than the listeners we have now, I still want to do the show. This is absolutely my good addiction. I don't. Again, we were talking earlier. I don't think I have the gene, because it's definitely, there's something genetic there too. But I don't think I have the addiction gene. I've been able to, go through pain, take the oxycodone, When I feel high, I dump them down the toilet. Get out of my freaking house. I don't want anything to do with what you're doing to me right now. But yeah, this show, not to go off on a tangent, but this show for me, and I think I can speak for the other guys, we talk about the show all week. We think about, I can speak for myself on this. I think about the show constantly. Outside of my work, outside of my kids, it's one of the things that I look forward to every week. So if I ever do get hooked on heroin, I'm gonna have to go back to the show.
There's a couple of things before I lose my thoughts here I want to just throw out there. One is, do you ever stop to think that we have a brain disease, but how often is our brains actually scanned?
Can you elaborate on that a little?
Well, like you can scan the brain to see how much dopamine is in somebody's brain. Their medications can be adjusted to that scan, but it's not done in the United States.
You mean the scans, the scan,
Yeah,
the forensic analysis? Yeah.
So you're saying we have the ability, but we're not utilizing it? Okay. Yeah, please go on.
But they are doing it in other countries, and in other countries with the chronic relapsers of heroin. And my son, as a pharmacist, agrees with me on this. Is, you know, heroin is much safer than methadone. So they have injection clinics where there's a documentary on this where they do their own heroin. They come there 3 times a day. So then they get their Social Security, they buy them a TV, they get them a place to live, the crime rate goes down. But we don't choose that. It is all or nothing. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. This all or nothing mentality is not working either. We don't scan the brain. You're either completely clean or you're not. And then you go to these meetings, NA meetings serve a purpose in my life, but they're different. They help 10% of the people. And it's all or nothing. If you're on an antidepressant, they'll tell you you're not clean. If you're smoking weed, you're not clean. You know, if you're on Suboxone, you're not clean. But you know, who really cares? Do you have a good, are you smoking weed and you have a good life? You getting up, going to work every day, taking care of your kids. So all that, we got to rethink the whole system. We got to do harm reduction, and we've got to realize that it's not all or nothing. That's one thing that bothered me the whole time. I thought, God, I'm never going to have another drink. I'm going to go to the beach and everybody's going to be drinking. I'm never going to be able to have another drink. And, you know, what will I do if I have to have pain pills? Oh my God, what am I going to do? So I had all these crazy fears in my head that were never addressed because nobody knew how to help me, because nobody that had ever had made it through it. They always went back to sources I found. But then I had a 3rd-degree burn. I had a pressure cooker blow up on me. Jeez. And I was forced to use narcotics, but I never took them closer than 8 hours. Then I had a back surgery, so I can use drugs now and put them down, because my pain was the little girl. My pain was the inner child, and she's not hurting now. And I live in chronic pain. I don't ever want to be completely out of pain. And I use Kratom, over-the-counter Kratom. I got through back surgery with over-the-counter Kratom, which is controversial, but it hits the same opioid receptors in the brain. Yeah, people have been addicted. I've read it. They say it's hard as hell to come off of. But another thing, and I've been through all this because right now I have pinched nerve in my neck and my lower back, and I need 2 major surgeries, and I'm not willing to do it. So I'm on a big nutritional kick now, and I'm turning a lot of new stuff around here that's changing all of this. I mean, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about the system, and I know a lot, and I got to get it all on paper. I think so I can start distributing, but I know ways to help people, and I know things that'll turn this around, and if people are willing to listen and try it and work with it, you know,
I think a big part of this is we have to stop making it so goddamn profitable for the pharmaceutical industry, for the cartels, where it almost feels like they do just enough to show that they're trying. And if somebody that 10% survives, they can go, hey, look what we did. But I think what you're saying is that we could have a far bigger number of survivors of these
Yeah.
situations.
And
If
this
they would
is
just
what
be-
I'm right. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, if they would just be, if they would just be more proactive and be more empathetic and care about the addicted person, but it doesn't make them money, and they're the they. You know what I mean? I feel like sometimes you got to take the earth. We got to take the earth and do like we do with the computer and just turn it off completely and turn it back on and hope shit gets better. But
Well, I also think as a society, I mean, so the real side of this, that as far as like if you wanted to talk about like the general public or what have you, but you know, you said you were an addict for 43 years or so, roughly. You know,
43.
and people, you know, people who, you know, drink too much, people who take drugs, whatever, any kind of destructive behavior. Um, there's usually, sometimes, not always, but a long list of people that are like, hey, you know, they may not know how to help, but they're like, hey, you need to stop doing this or whatever. Or that person does something to harm this other person. And a lot of people in society, they're like, I'm not messing with this because I had one friend and like a neighbor, and they screwed me over on some, or they broke in my house and took my TV or whatever. So I'm done. I'm not dealing with that anymore, right? And the truth is, it takes a lot. And you're saying like what, 10, 12% successfully? I mean, you know, the other side of that is, and it sounds ridiculous to say, like, this is why addiction has such a bad reputation. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but I'm saying from a marketing standpoint, you know, everyone else, it doesn't have an addiction situation. Like 90% of the time they're interacting with people who have had this issue, it's a negative interaction to them, right? And it's so that has to be overcome, the perception. And that's why this whole thing years ago, where it's like, look, this is an illness, right? I don't know if it's not, you don't catch it like, you know, a virus, but it is an illness. And it's like when someone gets cancer, we're not like, you better just take care of yourself because every time I treat someone with cancer, it comes back. And then, you know, we don't do that.
don't
You
die
know,
on
I'm saying treating it, your point of it being a medical issue and not a lack of character issue or a moral deficiency issue is key in kind of helping people help people, you know, through this. You know,
and
it's
and if I may add to what you're saying, I think the lack, the what was you said, moral character, and what was the other one?
who, me?
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Oh, I don't remember.
well,
No, you
we
said
were-
you said it's about medicine and treatment and not moral
And not
character.
moral character, right? It's not a deficiency of
Right.
and
the
I think
human
that those
being.
things
It's a
are.
medical issue.
I'm sorry. I think those things are there, but they're medically induced. Like the addiction takes over. It's like you can only you can drive the car or the addiction can drive the car.
Right.
And quite frankly, a lot of times with an addict, the addiction drives the car. And if the addiction runs over a toddler going through a school zone, you know, that's just what it is. And I yeah, I mean,
But I think Sheila's point was earlier with like the brain scans and we've turned this into a zero sum game. So
Exactly.
either you are 100% clean or it's like binary, or you are an addict, right? And what her point is, I think, is if you deal with this through like harm reduction, and it's like, look, you know, like, you know, she needs surgery. She's probably gonna have to take some sort of painkiller, or she has, you know, because she had these other. It's not about just doing without, it's about learning to fix the thing that's causing the people to want to take the drugs. That's the issue. It's not the drugs.
and that's
Because-
why I said you got to commingle the two. You got to have the addiction treatment mixed in with the dialectical behavioral therapy or the cognitive behavior, because they're not going to one's always going to succeed over the other. So you gotta titrate them down, both of them, kind of equally, and that is a balancing act. But as we can see from this lovely lady, it can be done. It's clear that it can be done, but
Like we talked about, it's not, the drug is not the problem. Why we use that drug. And I think the fact that I can use and not abuse a drug, that proves it right there. That proves it. I don't like the way pain pills make me feel now. I hate the thoughts of even taking a pain pill. I could have a drink if I wanted it. I don't want to drink. I don't like the taste. I don't like the way it makes me feel. Do I like to smoke weed? Yeah, I smoke weed.
Right. But what I'm
Good
saying
for
is,
you.
but that's a perfect example. So it's not like 100.
And it gets me by. My doctor, he's like, I don't mind you smoking the weed, just don't be doing nothing else. And I'm like, I just smoke in the summer. It's really weird. It's a seasonal thing. And I do it when my dopamine levels are off. I know when they're off. Because man, I got the music going and I'm smoking the weed, and man, my dopamine levels are off. And that's what I'm saying. If you know, I want to donate my brain to research because there's so much to be learned from what I've been through. And that's another reason I'm trying to document it, hoping somewhere down the road that all this is going to change. But big pharma keeps getting richer. What the next trend you're going to see now is the American population is addicted to gabapentin that is not FDA approved for pain or for addiction.
well,
And
they
big
did
pharma has
it
been
Class C.
fined over and over and over, and they pay the fines and they keep promoting it. And from all the people that I have talked to about detox and gabapentin, they say it is a bitch to detox.
Yeah,
What's
so
it called? Gabapentin?
Gabapentin.
gabapentin started out as a neurological medication for people with diabetic nerve pain. And I think it's not hard to make the connection between diabetic nerve pain and it being what. So the reason why gabapentin recently, you know this, I'm sure, Sheila, gabapentin recently became a Class C medication, meaning that it's a narcotic. And the reason isn't because it gets you high. The reason is because it accentuates whatever you're getting high with. So if you take gabapentin and you take benzodiazepines, you get the highest of high out of the benzodiazepine. And I'm dumbing this down. That's not 100% accurate, but essentially gabapentin, because it's related to nerves, I think that's why they have to, and it enhances other drugs' effects. That's why it's a Class C. It's not so much that it is necessarily a narcotic, it's that it makes narcotics great.
Yeah, and it's
Well,
not
well, wait, but what is it?
You can get high. Let me say this right quick. You can get high from gabapentin. I've seen drug addicts snort it and get high. They love the capsules. They snort it. And they put me on Lyrica. They sent me to pain management because they misdiagnosed me, and I knew that I was misdiagnosed, so I wouldn't accept narcotics. But I was trying to get Lyrica because I couldn't take the gabapentin. It messed up my vision for the nerve pain. That's when I found out all this information.
Mm-hmm.
So I go to pain management. I'm just kind of curious too, because I want to see what's going on. I went to Suboxone clinic for the same thing. I didn't take the Suboxone. I wanted to see what's going on. And Suboxone is no different than the other stuff out there. It's just, you know.
Can you explain what Suboxone is for the guys? Because I'm pretty sure they're not familiar with Suboxone.
Suboxone is a small dose of opioid with Narcan, because this is a brain disease. And the what happens is that when we get a message, the neurotransmitter in our brain doesn't take the message all the way across. It doesn't cross like it should. They did research trying to revamp that, and they thought they would be able to revamp that and get the impulse to go across, and they could cure addiction, but the research failed because I followed it. But that little bit of opiate, it takes that on across. So you put that little, and then with the Narcan in there, they can't take it. If you take in more narcotics, it blocks them. But it's also a potentiator drug. If you take that little bit of opioid with the Xanax, like you said, it increases the strength of it. But when they put me on the Lyrica, which is in the same family as gabapentin, I was as high on a capsule, the lowest dose of Lyrica as any drug I've ever been on, and I failed twice on that drug.
I never knew that. That's
I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't even talk to people in the store, and I would tell them, I took Lyrica today and I'm just rambling. I couldn't think of the words I needed to say. I came home. That was horrible. I'll never take those drugs again. So then that's when I started doing the research. And like I'm writing for the Vortebeck that, did the prison time over the pill mills in Florida. And Big Pharma is nothing but about money. And I'm trying to help him expose Big Pharma and bring them down. That's one of my big goals. I will continually try to expose Big Pharma because what they're doing is wrong. None of their people, one person has gone to prison and it was a crazy, it was just a cover up. I guarantee they probably didn't go to prison, but and then the middleman, like Vortebeck said, the middleman, the drug addict, they die. The pain patient, they suffer. And then, the people on the bottom is selling it out for Big Pharma and everybody else. They go to prison.
Wow. Wow.
That's the way the system works. And Big Pharma's untouchable. I've tried too hard. I know too many people that have, but I keep chopping at them away as long as I'm living. I keep chopping.
You're amazing, dear. You really are.
I'm crazy. I don't think I have any limits now. Before I didn't think I could do anything.
You're a testament to hope. Like I said, I've had family as well that have been addicted to heroin. They have gone to the, there's the YouTube videos where you take ephedrine and you put it with something else and you're flying high as a kite. I've lived through that. I've walked out into my living room and seen heroin being done. I reached up on the refrigerator and found a piece of aluminum foil with black tar opium in it. I'm assuming it was black tar opium, but I'm pretty sure it was. And that's a symptom of the problem too. When you're leaving out fucking opium on top of the refrigerator for your kid to find, you got some issues. Like that should be the eye opener, but addiction is, man. I mean, again, I'm thankful that I seem to have evaded it somehow with my lineage, but I get it. I completely get it. I mean, aren't we all looking for joy? And but we're also a Google fast food society. If I can find joy by smoking something or taking a pill, and I don't have to actually buy her flowers and talk to her nicely, or whatever thing that you were trying to find, what are most people going to do? We're going to go with the lowest common denominator, and we're going to go with what makes us happiest the fastest. But the problem is that happiness that we're getting is a Trojan horse. It's weed, I think, is probably pretty safe, but say acid or you name it, pills, benzodiazepine seems to be the Trojan horse of the day. But if we can get our joy by taking that, we're going to do it. But then 1 week we're doing it, 2 weeks we're doing it, 3 weeks we're doing it. Suddenly we can't do without it. And that is the Trojan horse part of it. It's like they got us. They fucking got us. And it's terrifying to me, because I don't think that this next generation of kids that's coming out is going to have near the resilience that I'd say our ages are close enough that us Gen Xers or are capable of. We just were a different group that I would be willing to bet, and you might even have some information on this, but I'll bet you Gen Xers probably have the best rate of success in breaking these habits of all of them, because it's just a different group of people.
Well, yeah, and age, the older you are, the greater your chances are to quit. My age went in my favor. That was the one thing that was going in my favor, was my age, that older people will usually stick with it longer. But we have already lost a whole generation of people to fentanyl poisoning and drug overdose I'm 63 years old. I won't live to see a lot of the effects of it, but it's going to be bad.
It's gonna
You're
be
making a
bad.
difference though.
I
Why is that with the younger people? Is it just because they're more surrounded by it, or why are they? Why is it harder for them to get out of it?
Peer pressure.
lack of perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, not hitting the growth and developments.
I mean, when you're
Well,
young, you think you're gonna live forever.
Yeah, but isn't that also Sheila's story? Because you had said you started drinking at like 15. So that's not just the younger generation. I mean, like you said, the older you are, the more chance you have at recovery. But the trick is you have to survive all those years of addiction, and a lot of people just don't.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking though, as far as Gen X and susceptibility to addiction versus the new generation, it seems like, we were raised by the boomers. You know what I mean? Like, and I think there were a lot of latchkey kids back in those days. Like, I know myself, I was.
Mm-hmm.
There was a different perspective on the psychology of children back then. I think that there was more propensity to feel a little unsafe when we were young because we would be out doing all sorts of things, and mom and dad were at work, and they probably just didn't take seriously the things that psychologists and counselors and parents do now. Like now you have helicopter parents where the kid's always right. Okay, Johnny, you know what I mean? Like they want to be the kid's friend, not the parent. And they're controlling like the entire like world of the child. So whereas Sheila didn't feel loved or safe as a kid, I almost feel like the new generation is so coddled that how is that going to manifest? And maybe we're seeing that with everybody's offended by everything and everybody wants to be affirmed now. And we weren't like that, but I don't know. I think our generation, there was more neglect than young parents are doing now. And so I think that the ground was ripe for addiction. You know what I mean? It was like, parents would even hit their kids more back then, when
Yeah.
we were
Yeah.
kids. You know what I mean? Like there was legitimate trauma. And now you have guidance counselors in every school, all the way back to, first and second graders, and you have more state involvement. What are those parents up to? Why does that kid always wear the same clothes? You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
they're really watching the parents now, and the state is getting more involved. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Like, I don't know how much state involvement we want in the raising of our children. Now, right, that's you get what I'm saying, Sheila. Like, you don't want a little kid to grow up the way you did, abandoned. But at the same time, the family's going to should have some privacy in the way they raise their children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I think the core, because you're either raised properly and that's how you grow up, or you're not. And if you're not, then I think there's a greater chance. Let's say you grow up impoverished and your parents are drug addicts or alcoholics, even. Let's just call them that. You don't have a lot of parental supervision. Like you add up all those things, and chances are you're more likely to end up either in jail or addicted or poor. I mean, they have social studies on that. And I just don't know. Does it take a village? Does it take the entire state? Do we want the government more involved?
No,
Or does it just take two parents that are doing their job?
and
And
Does it
unfortunately,
take
Sheila,
two?
you were abandoned, you said, and you were drinking by 15. And it probably wasn't long after that that you tried something else, whether it was weed or
Yes.
coke or
Yeah,
whatever.
more and harder.
Yeah.
But
Can-
you know,
can-
Yeah.
there's just a few things here. One is that because of all the generation of people that were on drugs, these children that you're talking about, they were raised by the grandparents. We've got a
Mhm.
Yeah.
generation of kids raised by their grandparents. Happened in my family. My sister had to raise all of her grandkids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the
It,
family unit broke down a long time ago, but it has been research shows that if you have one stable parent in your life, that's enough to keep you from being a drug addict. One stable parent.
I believe it.
And
Yeah,
they don't need to be put into the system.
I mean,
System only
I
fails
see.
most of
I
it.
don't know, because then how do you account for, let's say you have somebody who's got at least one stable parent, maybe even two, but you also have that population of people that are just biochemically off. They just are. You have bipolar disorder, you have severe depression. Like you've got some
Schizophrenia.
people,
Yeah, everything.
and those people are going to also probably try to numb the pain, feel joy, feel centered. And they're also going to perhaps go down the road, and that goes back to what you said before. Like we need to at least, perceive the signs in your young kids that something may be wrong that can be fixed before they turn to their first drink or their first joint or
and
whatever.
and it's a continuum, I mean, I don't think there's one path necessarily. I mean, it's
No.
everyone has their own life experience, and I'm sure there's people that get into addiction completely recreationally. I mean, I have known people who, you know, it's like socially they got into certain things, and then everyone else in their social group kind of moved on and they didn't. You know what I mean? It's like, and so I don't know if they had any previous trauma or not. I don't know. You can't read people's minds. I think the point is, and like what Sheila's saying is, I think Sheila's experience is not, it's far from uncommon. I think it's
Right.
unfortunately very common. So other people can get into this different ways, but we still have this problem here that we need to deal with that's substantial,
I think
that is huge.
a big
you're right.
part of it is our kids. I mean, for the future, that our kids aren't being given that attitude of resilience. Like there's something to be said for, speaking for myself, I come from a household that although I love both my parents dearly and they were good parents despite some of the problems they had, somehow I have avoided the need for those chemical surrogates to fill in the gap of I wasn't loved enough, or I was left alone too much, or I didn't win at dodgeball. I was always the guy that got hit in the head. Like there.
Explains a lot.
I think. Yes,
Oh,
it does. Yes,
did you
it
guys
does.
hear that? Sorry.
You meant only think it.
Yeah, that was just
but
my
you
mind.
thought it out loud.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, resilience is, I think, a big part of this. It's like, and I do want to. I have a kind of a whammy question for the end here with you, Sheila, but I do feel like you, in your case, that you were 15. You never got a chance to learn that resilience. We talk about a lot on the show, the going out into the woods, or going out at the beginning of the day when it's at dawn and coming back when the lights come on. Like you didn't get that because you were already in like survival mode. Is that
From
a
an
fair
early age, even earlier, 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, we weren't allowed in the house during the day, but there's so many telltale signs that I learned writing my book. I sucked my thumb. I wet the bed till I was 12 years old.
That's a huge one.
There's so many signs that were there as a child if parents were educated and they started looking at it. My nephew that was born addicted to opiates, he is not hitting all of his growth and development milestones, but the social services follow these drug addicted children all the way through their life. And he had speech problems, and we got him help, but
Wow.
that's permanent. The drugs have permanently affected his speech. They don't think it will get better. He functions well, but they are watching the children. The drug addicted babies are supposed to be followed through the rest of their life. I've not really got to keep up with that part of the research, but with alcohol, they did this research and they used this board called the Tipsy board. So I could be my best friend of 43 years, no, 43, 50 some years. We're best friends since 4th grade, and she was my drug buddy, and she was a beauty queen, and I was a jock. I was in sports, and I was very good in sport, very good athlete. But I'd show up drinking to run a track meet. I'd show up drinking to be a cheerleader. I kept vodka in the cheerleading room. I showed up for school to be in sports and not have to go home after school. But the tips, me and her could always outdrink everybody. We go to a party, we could outdrink everybody at the party. They took
That's a
us
good thing,
tips.
right?
And listen, my drug addiction served a big purpose in my life. It kept me from committing suicide. I put a gun to my head, I pulled the trigger, it grazed my head, it blew big. I had 38 with hollow points in it, blew a hole in the ceiling, messed up my hearing for weeks. I took me some more Xanax and went back to sleep.
Jesus.
So then the next time I decided I wanted to die, which I should not be here. I medically should not be here for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, you said you died twice, right?
Yeah, or given childbirth. I was blew twice. I had full-blown eclampsia. But the next time I said, well, I've got to put this gun in my mouth and pull the trigger. That's what I did wrong, put it to my head. And when it jumped back, because I never actually shot the gun, it jumped back and I missed. Plus I was all messed up on drugs. So I put the gun in my mouth and I got my 38s. I mean, it's full, chamber's full. Pull the trigger on it and the gun won't go off. My stepfather had actually broke into my house and disarmed my gun.
Wow.
Who says karma isn't a real thing? Like all these things where you could have been like tapped out, not helped people, everything, for what it's worth, I'm not saying your addiction is a good thing, but it brought you here to this point in our brief little spots that we have on this planet. It brought you here to a point where you can help others. And that is like so effing amazing.
That's my piece. It served a purpose. But the Tipsy board, what they found out, children of alcoholic parents, they could drink and walk across that board and never have a problem getting across this board that tipped back and forth. Children of non-alcoholic parents would have one drink and they couldn't get across the Tipsy board. So what they found out is our liver does not secrete the enzyme that tells our brain it's time to quit drinking. I was an alcoholic with my first drink. From the first time I ever had a drink, every time I would be out where I could drink to blackout, I would drink to blackout. I never put it down till I blacked out. I'd have to look in and see if I drove my car home the night before. How I got home, open the door to look, see if I drove myself home, somebody else brought me.
That's frightening.
So,
yeah, and 2 times that they did CPR on me when I overdosed, I could hear my niece in the waiting room crying and screaming because she thought I was dead. And I said, what is wrong with her? And my sister said, well, you wasn't breathing when they left the house with you, you overdosed. And I said, well, tell her to quit crying like that. She's embarrassing me. I left there and used again. I mean, we are sick people. Does anybody wake up one day and say, I choose that life. I choose that kind of life. I hurt so many people. I hurt myself the worst, but I hurt so many people with my addiction.
well, now, did you hurt yourself your worst? And I'm saying this in a joking manner, but you were high the whole time. So you've hurt yourself now in retrospect, but really you did hurt. And I'm not condemning you,
No,
but you
you're
hurt those
exactly
around
right.
you. You hurt those around you, and you were busy just,
Getting
up
that
in the air.
dopamine.
Yeah.
It's harder on the family because they're not numb like we are. I say that all the time. It's harder on the family because we got a pill. We're numb. We numb out. We don't have to deal with
Exactly.
it all the time.
So I wanted to, and we don't have to end the show, but before we end the show, I wanted to, as like a cautionary tale, I wanted you to go through as much as you can. And if you don't want to, then that's completely fine. But go through as much of the timeline of where you started and go through what your next step was. If that's too much, I completely am fine. But I feel like it would really benefit people listening. And of course, in this, you can say this is where this part of my mentality was happening, and this is why I did it. So they can maybe learn from your, I don't want to call it a mistake, but from your experiences.
Yeah, from my mess. God took my mess and turned it
Mess.
into a mess. That's what happened. Well, I didn't just
Like, do you remember your first drink?
I didn't just have a drug addiction. I had a shopping addiction at the same time.
Do you remember do you remember your first drink?
Oh yeah, like yesterday.
Hmm.
And for the time I was 15 years old, I was a cheerleader. I had a very strict mother that did not allow me to stay away from home. I manipulated her into letting me go to a party that the varsity cheerleaders were having with the JV cheerleaders, and there was alcohol there. It was vodka. And I started drinking that vodka, and I didn't stop till I was vomiting, which is usually how I always ended up my drinking, with my head in the commode or blacked out. That's why all I lived from there was the next drink. I couldn't wait till the next football game. Then I'd manipulate my mother to let me stay with the judge's daughter, because everybody trusted the judge, and we'd get in his booze and we'd camp out and we'd drink all night. And then he'd have the teachers up there, they'd be drinking and partying too. So yeah, I lived to drink again. I was obsessed with that thought of drinking again. I couldn't wait to get another drink. Then I started drinking at school. I showed up, me and my best friend, on homecoming court. High as you can't imagine how high we were. And we're walking out in front of the whole school like that. I showed up for track meets drinking. I'd act like I was mad at the coach not to have to run if I'd had too much to drink. And then when I got out of high school, the clinic in the 1980, I was 18 years old when I got my LPN, turned 19 soon after that. And here's all the doctors and the drugs, and the doctors hitting on you, and the doctors writing you pills. And then I started smoking the weed. I have to have chest x-ray because my lungs are getting pretty bad because I'm smoking a lot of weed. I'm smoking the weed through alcohol in the bong. Then I'm taking amphetamines so I can drink more and stay up and make it to work. And then the doctors are going to write me some more amphetamines. And if they want, everybody in the clinic's got them, so the access. But when they did the chest x-ray, then the lady of the chest in there said, I'm 19 years old, 19. She said, do you party? I said, of course, I'll party. You saw my chest x-ray. I smoke a lot of weed. And she said, oh, my husband is a pharmacist. He made some good meth. You ever done meth? I said, no. What's it like? She said, oh, it's a great high. I said, well, I said, I've been eating these Altonamines that all the doctors over there are writing them. And she said, oh, no, you got to try this. So, yep, I'm at her house right after work. I'm doing their crystal meth. That's in the 80s. It's pure crystal meth. I was up for 3 days. I was down with the toothbrush, cleaning my baseboards. Then when I crashed, oh, my God, that's one reason I didn't like cocaine. I really wasn't willing to spend the money on that. But the crash off of uppers is hard. It's a hard crash. And see, then after I had the crystal meth, then I had to have to take 2 Altonamines. I have to take 3. You're always chasing that high. You're always chasing that high. I chase a high of some kind every day of my life. My brain is used to running on high levels of dopamine, and I don't care. I worked like when the sex abuse part opened up in my brain, I went and bought me some chainsaws. I cleared 3 house lots.
Wow.
Most of my arms are the strongest they've ever been, but it was therapeutic. It was therapeutic, cutting those trees and stacking those logs, and I could think, I could process, I could work and process, but just to sit idle time is horrible for me. I have to stay busy. I paint, I do crafts. I've got 3 fur babies that are just absolutely my world. And which I bred my 2 babies. So from December 11th all the way through, I was
And,
breeding dogs. I bred
and
rabbits. I have 5 rabbit cages in my front yard.
Wow.
when we were preparing for the show, I got to see her fur babies. They're all like Yorkies, or they're very adorable. I got to give her well done with the fur babies.
They have a fan club. It's really cute. People buy for them all the time. Everybody knows them everywhere. They're kind of famous.
That's awesome.
I
Wow.
want to use them as therapy animals for the long-term care facilities. That was my plan, and then COVID hit, but I really want to take them into long-term care, and I would like to see music and animal therapy implemented into treatment. If I'd had a fur baby when I was detoxing, when I was sitting up there in that room alone, it could have changed my life, because then there's my dopamine fix, and there's my
Yeah.
You know,
oxytocin.
I don't think you were meant to be an addict. I think addiction happened to you. You've got a quality about you that I ascertain as it was nurture, not nature. I get the feeling that, wow, what if this hadn't happened to you? What would you be now? First female president? I mean, maybe. I'm
So
very
possible.
impressed with your story.
Yeah, Sheila, thanks a lot for coming on our show.
This
Very
has really been
much.
good for me, and I've enjoyed it. And I'm going to send all of you a copy of my book.
Oh,
We will
please,
get
yes,
it.
yes. Actually,
I
give us
have
some words on that stuff.
well, these are my these are short stories, and I want to read you what it says on the front. The motions that can break your heart is sometimes the very ones that heals it.
Wow.
And this book is short stories of nursing stories that I carried in my heart my whole life. One was a baby that was born, an abortion when I was a student nurse that I witnessed, that was born alive. I picked him up out of the commode. He lived 4 hours. They never turned a light on him. I had to watch that baby die, and I quit nursing school that day. I still have PTSD from it to this day.
Wow.
But I started writing. I wrote all the nursing stories that I was still carrying in my heart, because I was a chemotherapy nurse, and I was a hospice nurse, and I was a nurse manager. I was in rural health, so I did it all. We had to. We didn't have any other choice. And
Yeah.
if it snowed, you stayed at the hospital. Sometimes slept in a patient room for a week at a time because people couldn't get to work. You had to stay and work 16 hours, sleep 8. So I just wrote all those stories, and every story in my book is a story I was still carrying in my heart. It's like, this is baggage. And when I wrote this book and I put it on this paper, it's gone. It was gone.
Mhm.
And it's so healing. It's so therapeutic. And it doesn't matter if you're a drug addict or not. If you, like, I tell nurses when I was working, I said, go home and write about your pain. Like that movie, I Can Only Imagine. The guy in that, he's singing about his pain. His manager said, write about that pain. Write about your pain. Then tear it
It's the
up,
good
burn
addiction.
it. Yeah,
It's
and
a good
let it
addiction.
go.
Let it go.
Wow.
But you don't see that in treatment. Does anybody that I colored all kinds of pictures in treatment.
No, I'm laughing because I hand out boxes of crayons on a regular basis.
Mhm.
And we give out those old composition journal books, and really there is something to be said for journaling, for just getting it out there into the universe and letting it go out and do what it's got to do, but not be with you. And yeah, wow, that's really
It's a
intense.
beautiful freedom, and recovery is beautiful. It's a beautiful life. The
I'm so
sun, I feel everything deeper. The sun rises, the sun sets, everything is just like, it's just like you can't wake up to see that and witness it and just be a part of like, I couldn't figure out who God was. First of all, I had a real hard time connecting with my spiritual part. And I was at a waterfall one day, and I had read this quote. It said, don't look at the waterfall, but think about the creator. And
Wow.
that sustained me for a long time. And it still does. But I think, yeah, look, God created all of this. He's my father. He owns it all. I'm rich.
Mhm.
And I feel that way. I have been to the top financially. I was married to a multi-millionaire, and I've been to the bottom. And a very simple life is what keeps me humble and what keeps me clean. And I know every day that I get up, today is all I have. Today, I just got to get through today, not picking up a pill, not thinking about a pill, hopefully, which I don't anymore.
Sheila,
And
I
when
gotta tell
tomorrow
you,
gets here, do tomorrow. And that got me from one day to the next. That kept me putting one foot in front of the other. And my community in Virginia, they all rallied behind me. I got cards, I got books. I had the most beautiful support system.
Sheila, I gotta say, we're gonna wrap things up, but I gotta say, this has happened before on this show where karma just meets us up with the right people. I'm so glad that we met you.
Absolutely.
I
Yep.
absolutely, when we can, I would love to have you on again. And
I was just gonna say, yeah.
I most certainly want you to stay in my Facebook group. I want to know what's going on in your life. I'm really pleased to have met you. I'm speaking for me. I think
And Jack,
the guys will back me up. But Jack
Yep.
has some words that he usually gives at the end of the show, and he's trying to dump it on me, but I'm going to leave it with him.
yeah.
All right, that's fine. Okay, Sheila, thank you. Like Zeus said, it's been a pleasure. And we have been on for a while now. So I think it's time we wrap things up.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye, guys. Bye,
Yeah.
Sheila.